Okay, what we're going to talk about today is measurement. This is really key in self-mentoring. And there's two types of measurement. And I think this is the easy, well, actually, there's lots of different ways of collecting data and measuring it. But the two that we're going to focus on are very broad. And the first one's going to be quantitative, and the second one's going to be qualitative. And they are exactly what they imply. Quantitative refers to quantity, an amount. So it's going to be data that's very objective in nature. It can be counted. It might be surveys, questionnaires. It could be true or false responses, multiple choice answers, Likert scales where you pick a number. Qualitative refers to quality, and it normally means very rich data. This is normally subjective in nature, and it comes from interviews, it comes from notes, journals, and what you do with this kind of narrative or written dialogue is you start looking for common themes. A lot of times you do what they call coding in order to look for words that stand out. And from the scientific perspective, usually quantitative data can be easier construed and analyzed. Qualitative is a little more complicated and more difficult. But for what we're doing, and the nature of our type of measurement, either one of these are going to work. They'll both be great. So let's look specifically at quantitative, and some examples that we've listed here are what we've already kind of talked about, and that is surveys. And surveys just simply sending out something. You ask somebody a question, you ask them to respond, and you give them responses to pick from. Keep your surveys short. The key to any kind of a questionnaire or survey or anything like that is keeping them relatively short. Students, adults, no one really likes to spend 15 minutes filling out a survey. So 5 questions, a couple questions. Sometimes just one question isn't enough to really get to the heart of what you're asking. Same thing with questionnaires, which are very similar. A Likert scale, this is simply a scale that you might have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you ask them, 6 being the highest and 1 being the lowest. You ask them to simply circle what represents their feelings about something. And the example I always give is, if you go to the hospital, if you're in the emergency room, they have what they call a pain scale, and it's from 1 to 10, and they'll say, how much pain are you in? And from 1 to 10, you have to pick a number, and that gives them information. Counts, it might be counting how many hands are up. It might be counting how many students responded. It might be counting how many times a student made eye contact. These kind of, and a checklist is something where you might ask somebody to check all of the things that they feel about something. And so that's something. These are all things that give you numbers, or you can quantify the information. You can count it. Qualitative is just like the opposite. It is things that you really can't count. With interviews, observations, journaling, notes you make, blog sites, notes that students make, empirical observations, any of these kind of very nebulous examples where you are collecting information, feedback that you might get from a teacher, your reflection notes. But what you can do with these is you can go in and you might note that a certain thing keeps popping up. And so that gives you some direction so that you can pull from that and say, well, I got feedback from 3 different teachers, and all 3 of the teachers independently in each of their feedback notes, I was able to extract that they all said this one common thing came out of that. So that's what you're looking for in qualitative. You can also mix them together. You could have surveys as well as take reflection notes. And for the most part, that's what's going to happen to you. You're going to be doing this combination. The key is to match up the data collection with the measurement tool. So whatever it is that you're wanting to collect data on, you need to make sure that you've found the tool that matches with that. An example is, I'm thinking, how many people are going to go scuba diving? So this is quantitative data. You're looking at a boat here. So how many people are on there? How many people are going to go scuba diving? You can literally count that. It is a number that you can defend. But if we say, what level of anxiety do the divers have about this dive? Well, now all of a sudden, that's not something you can observe. Some people might hide it very well. You might be able to find an online anxiety scale, and you could ask each diver to rate their level of anxiety. Well, then this would be quantitative. Or you could just get them to talk about their anxiety, how they feel about it, and then you could go through and try to rate and see if they had a lot of anxiety by the way they responded, and that would be qualitative. So here's an example where you're trying to collect data on something, and you could use either one of these or a combination. Another example is your expectation is that you want to increase student engagement. You're using a video camera, you're going to collect several vignettes, snapshots of your class during instruction, and you want to be able to look at those videos and determine if this new strategy that you've implemented while teaching is actually increasing student engagement. So what kind of measurement are you going to use? Well, if your expectation is to increase student engagement, you're using the video camera to collect the vignettes, there is actually, you could go both ways on this. You could use qualitative, or you could use quantitative, or you could use both. And from the quantitative perspective, you could count student participation maybe through their hands that are up, the questions that they ask, or even the amount of eye contact that they are looking at you. You also could use a scale from 1 to 6, and you could ask students to rate their engagement, and that would also give you a number. So either one of those are examples of quantitative. Qualitative, you could just interview the students and collectively start getting feedback from them and start looking for patterns and to see if they feel that, yes, they are more engaged. And the way you might do that is you wouldn't necessarily just say, do you feel more engaged? But you might say, did you understand this activity? Was it clearer for you? Did you have a better understanding of it? And what made it more understandable? And did you like this activity? And what did you like about it? What made you like it? So those are the kind of questions that you would ask probably in an interview. There is a chart that might help you walk through this as you're building your mentoring plans. And if you look at this, the first thing is, and you've already done this, but again, it doesn't hurt you to write it out again. What's that expectation? And then what's the strategy that you're implementing? Then what's the type of data, qualitative or quantitative, that you're probably going to be looking for? Your measurement tool, whether it's going to be a survey, an interview, or journals, and then the data that you'll collect, how are you going to aggregate all that together, and then how are you going to analyze the results? And I think if you kind of walk through this chart, this might help you kind of have a focus. And you would do this for each activity or for each strategy. So you wouldn't do just one of these. If you may do one for one strategy, but when you may take the same strategy and implement it a second time, and you may do different type of data collection. So you could literally have the same strategy and fill out 2 or 3 of these. Or you might fill one of these out for every strategy. Or every time you start a new period where you're measuring it, you may fill out another one of these. So, or you wouldn't have to use it all, but this is something that might kind of help you get through that process. Again, it's your life. You lead. You determine how do you want to do this, determine what kind of data you want to collect, and how you want to work through this process.